Hello and welcome to Monday's Ascension forecast. So I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I am now doing these on a Monday on my own, and these are all about being soul aligned. So that's my main focus on a Monday. So grab a cup of tea and come and join me, and let's discuss what the Ascension energies are bringing forth for us this month, or at least this week. But I have got some predictions for this month as well. So do grab your notebook and your journal and join me. So I'm just going to set everything up here and make sure I can see your comments. Cool, we're all set. So I want you to think about what does soul aligned mean for you? Because at the end of the day, everything I'm sharing will be in the context of that question. So if you want to put into the comments what soul aligned means to you, or what challenges you have becoming soul aligned, then that would be great to hear, because then I can make the content more specific. But I did write something. I kind of wanted to see if I could, in a few sentences, describe what I do. So I think I've already told you guys that I work with divine intelligence, and I get downloads as information. That's the way I work. I get information and I'm able to see how to join up the dots between certain things that kind of seem dualistic sometimes, but I tend to find the common thread between them anyway. And I'm very good as well at helping others find their context of what these sort of, because it's all metaphors, isn't it? When our soul speaks to us, it speaks to us in a language that is quite complex. So I help people kind of understand that too. But each week what I've been doing is tuning into the quantum to get a feel for the energies that are here, because since this time last year, since February last year, there was a huge shift. Doorways opened, new gateways opened, new soul wisdom came in, more of our multidimensional soul returned. It was just like this end of an era, and now everything's new. And the only way we're going to be able to track what that means for us as individuals is to allow us to communicate and share our experiences as we're doing here on Zoom. I'm on Zoom with others, but on YouTube Live for everyone every Monday. So by sharing my process, what I'm seeing, what I'm going through, what I want you guys to do is become discerning about what it means for you. Really connect into how my stories, how my sharing fits for you, because you might have a missing piece. So I'm really keen that you guys share in the comments what comes up for you, not just like what you hear me say, but what does that trigger within you, because you might have the next step. Now, it's quite difficult doing energy forecasts because I'm giving you, like, hot off the press, the most recent energy that I've sensed that I haven't had time necessarily to completely integrate or embody. And why am I doing that? Because I think if I leave it until I integrate it, I'll miss an opportunity to share it with you, and you'll miss an opportunity to integrate it with your life. And this kind of goes along the lines of imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. So I'm practicing that. So I'm sharing with you the kind of basics of what I'm sensing now, and it might not resonate today, but maybe next week, suddenly you'll kind of have that moment where you'll think, oh, wow, yeah, I remember truly saying that. And that's what it's led to in your life. So I'm a soul guide, and I'm Trudy, and my page is called White Star Soul Guidance. So what I try to do is help people connect to their soul and learn the language of their soul so that they can connect to their great vision, their soul's great vision for their life. Because I feel like a lot of deep thinking sensitives are here with some really, really important information, but often they're too shy, or they feel like they're misunderstood. So they're not willing to get out there and share their message. And that's me. So that's why I'm here. You know, I've had to get over my fears and show up on video and learn to communicate some things that are very vague sometimes, and feel courageous about doing that. And that kind of leads nicely into today's topic, which is obedience. Now, I don't know about you guys, but the first time I heard the word obedience, my instant reaction was, is obedience a spiritual thing? So I think, like, obedience is one of those words that we assume it's to do with giving away our power to authority. And yet I had this really cool explanation of what it was instead. And it said that actually it is more to do with, let me see if I can find the description. It's more to do with listening and paying attention. That's what obedience is. So if you think of it that way, can you can you change your perception? Can you change or reframe the word obedience in your life? So think of it, instead of conforming to authority, as being to listen, to hear, and not turn away from. So share in the comments what you think obedience means to you, and just your initial reaction. It doesn't have to be like the politically correct or the spiritually higher self answer. Just let me know how obedience landed on your body and what that made you feel initially. And for me, obviously, it was that kind of, oh, no way do I want to become obedient. It's like obedience is this bad thing. But the question isn't about being obedient. It's about who are you being obedient to? And that's what today's soul lesson is about. So it's interesting because words obviously have frequencies. So the words that we use have different frequencies, and then they create and manifest our life. And another word that kept coming up this week was conviction. And I had a struggle with that word too, because to be convicted is very much about like being convicted for a crime. So it also had a negative. So it's quite interesting. The two words that could be negative came up in the same week. And I had to look up conviction, and it just meant a strong belief in something. So conviction is a very powerful word. If you have the conviction of your beliefs, it's what carries you into taking action. So I thought that was quite interesting that both the words that came up this month or this week were very much it kind of had a reaction on my physical body. It made me kind of like tense up and think, I'm not sure I like this. So what I wanted to share with you today is a little bit more about how those words have, because whenever I get a word I don't know, I have to kind of go back and explore my life and see how they've either shown up or they haven't shown up, and then try and understand why. Because this word obedience could have had a different showing up. It could have shown up as trusting yourself, trusting the universe, spiritual discipline. It could have shown up as any of those words, and it didn't. It showed up as obedience. And I think there's a reason for that. I think the reason is that we have been obedient to the wrong things, for sure. But also I think it's almost like a make or break time now. It's telling you, if you don't start listening to your soul, because it's actually, that's what we should be obedient to. If we don't start listening to our soul and actually following who we are meant to be, then you're going to feel the pain of that now in a much more exaggerated way than maybe you felt before. So some of the ways lack of obedience will show up, and I'm not saying to what at the moment. I'm going to come into what obedience we want. But when you're not obedient, and when you don't have something to follow, because even if you're obedient to your parents, at least you'd have a structure to follow. But if you had no obedience to anything, then you would find things like you'd miss opportunities, you wouldn't take them, you would play small, you wouldn't take risks, you wouldn't make mistakes, you tend to be a perfectionist. You'd let others decide for you, and you might even use other people's acceptance to help validate yourself. You might try and fit in. You might feel like you're feisty and strong and pushing forward, but in reality, it's pain or anger that's driving you forward. And you probably have a lot of doubts about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that kind of impacts your confidence in yourself. So I'm sure we can recognize ourselves in a few of those things. So again, put any comments into the messages that if you resonate with any of those aspects. And I think, a lot of those are just us being sensitive. But when I talk about obedience in a moment, then hopefully you'll see how that relates to those topics. So the obedience that I'm talking about, of course, is to the soul, as I do all solar line work. That's the whole point of these Monday sessions. So the question is, how obedient are you to your soul? And then you can even ask yourself, and if you're not obedient to your soul, what are you obedient to? Every time you choose the slightly less bold path, you're weaving yourself into false contracts and more difficulties, because you're stopping your soul express itself through you. And each time you make one of those decisions, it becomes a combination, accumulation, that then completely adds up to the situation you're in now. Now, it's easy for us to blame everybody else for the reason we don't get opportunities, or why we don't feel like everybody understands us. But it's often a lot of choices that we've made that we can correct and can work with. The result of every decision point you've made was a point where you could choose to go big or go small. So of course, our soul is encouraging us to go big. Our personality is encouraging us to go small. So that's the kind of one of the obediences we can look at. So let's just consider all the different ways we can obedient, or all the different ways we can become obedient to the wrong thing. So the first form of obedience is soul or personality. Who is in the driving seat of you? And I think for me, for a long time, it was personality, but not in a egotistical kind of way, but in a fearful way. My personality, based on my logic and reasoning, made a lot of decisions for me. I would do lots of pros and cons and consider what option I wanted to go for based on risk, and sometimes mitigating risk as opposed to taking risk. And then in 2020, I decided to, and this is how I worded it, I decided to give in to this higher calling that I was sensing. Well, in reality, that higher calling was my soul, and it was not about giving in, but it was about listening and starting to pay attention to. But it's interesting, like it was this kind of battle that was going on within me between my soul and what I thought I ought to be doing, and that I expressed it as giving into it. But since I did that, I learned that at first it was a bit ropey. It wasn't quite sure how it was going to manifest. I didn't know where it was going to go or how it was going to work out. But once I'd got over that, the path that it led me on was random, sure, a little off-center sometimes, but where I ended up at the end was pretty amazing. So technically, that was me becoming obedient to my soul. The second thing that I did was I soon saw that my soul was more focused on vision and not solving problems as such, but creating a new future, a new vision. And that my obedience was more vision-driven than pain-driven. So again, I ask you now, when you think of your life and the decisions you make, what drives you? Who's in the seat? So is it your personality? Is it your pain? Or is it your soul and your vision? And as you kind of feel into that and get a sense for what that means to you, I'll give you some examples. So if I was more pain-driven, then I might be fighting against something. So say I was misunderstood in school because I'm Welsh. I'm just making something up here. Then maybe I become an advocate or a rebel for Welsh language schools or Welsh understanding or something like that. And that's great, but it's still being driven by pain. If I got ill and I didn't accept my illness, and I have chronic fatigue, so I actually have that, then again, I could become focused on fighting to get chronic fatigue recognized, arguing with people who don't understand it. Or I could change my direction and focus more on what goal did I discover during that time, especially the times where you're in bed and you're not able to move. What did I learn then that I've pushed forward into my life to create a better vision for the future? So that's an example of switching your obedience and to notice what you're going to pay attention to and what you're going to ignore. Now, it doesn't mean that just because our soul is telling us or our higher self is telling us what to do, that we should all automatically just listen to it and do what it says. I'm sure sometimes our souls gives us this really kind of big carrot and says, yay, let's go and do this. And I don't think that's the end goal. I think that's just the kind of like the push that you need to get up and actually do something in the first place. Sometimes what our soul wants is actually quite small, but it's very powerful. In each of those tiny little steps we take that our soul guides us on, it's very powerful because what it leads you to is being authentic. And what our soul really wants more than anything else is just to be expressed, to have that freedom of expression that's outside of all the rules that we try and put on it. So again, obedience is rules, but the rules we're actually trying to be obedient to is actually no rule at all. It's that freedom, liberation. It's a different set of rules altogether. So how does that feel to you? Does that resonate with you and how you connect to the word obedience now? And like I said, it could have come through as trust of self, trust of universe. It didn't. It came through as obedience. And I think that's because it's saying, look, you need to pay attention now. And there's been quite a lot of messages about us becoming more spiritual and more More spiritual is a difficult word to explain because we've all got our different practices. But spiritual for me, I keep mapping back to more soul aligned. I think that's got to be the anchor, the thing that I'm aiming for, because when I'm soul aligned, that's what makes me happy. When I'm soul aligned, I have an interesting life path. Something new pops up. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm expanding. And that's all I want. That's where I think our happiness comes from. You know, yes, we get challenges. Yes, it's always going to be difficult days and good days. But when you're soul aligned, it gives you a explanation and a feeling behind the scenes, like this divine plan that helps you move forward more. So the other aspect of obedience, of course, is if you're not doing your personality and you're not doing pain, then the other thing that can be driving you is society conditioning. Being the good girl, being the perfectionist, because that's what our parents valued. Being the intellectual, being the good study, being the good person who can regurgitate information. All of those things are, again, rules that are drivers and become the masters of our lives again. So based on that, we said that the lesson this month was all about obedience. So hopefully that's given you some areas to consider how obedience might be showing up for you, or ways that we need to consider it and think about it, because this is the divine intelligence that's coming through right now. So I think the challenge with obedience is a lack of sense of self. I find that the more sense of self you have, then the less you need other people or external structures to define who you are. So some ways of lack of sense of self shows up will be when you keep changing who you are in front of different people. You might use archetypes to label you so you can understand yourself better. You know, you might call yourself a HSP or an empath, or use Myers-Briggs kind of personality test to try and work out who you are, to try and explain to others so that they can understand you. When in reality, you are just you, and you are made up of all the right ingredients to be exactly what you're supposed to be at this time, so that you can birth these visions into reality. And those visions are that kind of soul telling you to go bigger and giving you some really interesting ideas right now to create with. And if you remember last week, we spoke about honoring the creative process, connecting to your ancient wisdom, creating a sacred space to create in. It's all of that that makes up who you are. And when you have that sense of that, which again is not a label, it's not a box, it's just a feeling. When you really connect to that feeling, then it's easier to know where to put your obedience and what to follow, because it's a feeling that pulls you towards it, and it guides you quite authentically through your life. So if that's the challenge, that we have a lack of sense of self, then what's the strength that we need to develop, or what strength do we have that we can draw on? Well, the strength is your body intelligence and your sensuality. So creativity, I had a long conversation with, sort of it started with my guides about what money represented, because I realized that, you know, if we're starseeds and we come from multiple dimensions, explaining money to a starseed, can you imagine kind of meeting your starseed and then explaining what money is? And money isn't what we want really, it's what money allows us to have is what we really want. So we want resources, we want security and safety, we want beauty, we want fun. That's what we want money to be able to chain for us. And, you know, a couple of weeks ago with the Galactic Sisters, we spoke about the DNA of activating our ancient DNA of the kind of way of living off the land and being able to live without the money kind of aspect, and how possible that still is. But it obviously takes some work to connect to that. So if we can get back to that feeling that it's our rightful place to live on this planet and not need money to do it, then what else does money give us? Well, or if we took money out, I should say, what should we use instead of money? And you go back to bartering and exchange and swapping out goods or services with each other. And again, if you go underneath that, well, you know, what is underneath that? Because two people could be baking bread. What makes the difference between that? Well, underneath that, again, we go into, it's the energy or the unique frequency of each individual baker that makes their bread different. So it comes back to that creative source. And that creative source in the human body particularly is also related to our sensual energy. it's known that when we're in that blissful feeling, when we're really connected into the body and feeling pleasure and bliss, that's our most optimum creative process. That's the time where we're more likely to have the inspired thoughts, to connect to our ancient wisdom, to just let things flow naturally, because we feel safe, we feel connected, and we feel valued because we can feel it in our body. So if that's what creativity is, then you can see how our strength is in nurturing that, to really sense into our bodies as being the way to help us know what decisions to make and when to make it. It's that niggle, and we use a lot of body testing when I teach people. It's this ability to use your whole body's intelligence to tip forward for a yes, to tip back for a no, and it kind of gives you that pull and push kind of feeling. So it helps guides you to choose things. So mine is so strong. I've developed this skill so much that now, even when I'm buying something in the supermarket, my body goes forward when I can eat it, and it goes backwards. When I meet people, it goes forward and backwards. So if anybody's ever watching me on the security cameras in any store, you'll see me going up against all the products, body testing them before I choose them. But it happens naturally. It's just now built in that I have that connection to my body. So imagine now that I've got that intelligence to help guide me, plus I can hear my soul and I can translate what my soul's giving me. And I'm actually now becoming obedient, as in I'm putting it together, deciding what it means, using a bit of logic, and then deciding how to take it forward into an action. It's all self-contained, it's all within me. I don't need anybody outside of me to help me. And it's pretty amazing when you're in that mode. That's the flow, that's the magic, that's the alchemist. And for me, that's what the quantum human is all about. You know, that's what I think people are waking up to. Now, it's interesting this month, because if this is this week's lesson about obedience, then the whole month was quite an eye-opener, because after the equinox, we kind of went through that tight squeeze where we moved into another phase again. But what's coming up for this month is that there's a new energy coming through, a new frequency, which could open up new clairs like clairvoyancy or clairaudience. There could be people who have never done anything like this before, suddenly starting to sense the tingle of this. And they're not necessarily going to be healers. They're not going to be light workers yet, because I think everybody's a light worker, but they might not recognize themselves as a light worker yet. But this is going to start being felt on a more mass consciousness level. And there's going to be people perhaps ignoring it and pushing it down. And again, this is where obedience comes in. It's like, please listen, please pay attention, please hear and don't turn away from it, because it's going to be a revelation and going to take the way you live life out of that logical, intellectual reasoning and add a whole new extra level alongside it that's going to add a more soul-satisfying way of approaching life. And when these energies come through, it's going to come through as niggles in your body. So you're going to feel it as a kind of a sensual feeling, a niggle, and it's going to feel perhaps a little bit odd if you've not had your life kind of being led by that energy. So pay attention to everything you sense, everything you feel. And to get better at that, it's even better if you can just pay more attention to your self-care. Because, you know, when that's kind of the first way we get in touch with our bodies, through massage or through music, you know, feeling music over our body and learning different ways to express our body and our physicality. Once we do that, the next step then is just noticing the energetic waves as they come in, noticing the tingles, the niggles, the things that are going to encourage you to step up and be bolder and give you that almost conviction of your beliefs. You know, that thing that'll go back when you sort of have that idea that says, yes, you need to go and be an artist, or you need to go and do something with animals, or you need to take your corporate work and bring in something more energetic and healing orientated and blend them together and create something new. It's that conviction and the feeling in your body that'll tell you if you're on track and if you've got the right idea. And it's the feeling in your body that will tell you when things are going wrong and when you're hanging out with the wrong people, so it can guide you and nudge you in the right way. So I'm quite excited by these new energies that are coming in. And I think this obedience lesson this week is really preparing us for that, to really step up, listen, to hear, and not turn away from the energies that are becoming available to all of us now. So I'm excited because for us who are light workers, who have already got our clairs activated, well, I'm excited but nervous as well. It's like one of my secret pet fears is that I'll start speaking light language. And I say this to everyone, and it's no bad thing to those that can do it, but for my logical brain, it's not quite ready for that yet. But then I realized I kind of do speak light language, because when I'm speaking, the words I choose, I hear coming through, and the words I express are all part of that language of weaving into you a memory, an activation, a little bit of your soul is speaking through me to you. So that is my light language. So I'm going to just accept that that's part of what I'm doing. But yes, it's going to be really interesting. You know, I've already seen that a lot of people are speaking a lot more about spirituality. I'm on LinkedIn now, and I see so many there talking about their new spiritual experiences. And that's great. I think we'll see a lot more of that coming up. And again, like last week, we talked about artificial intelligence versus divine intelligence. We need that balance. We need to connect more to our spirituality in order to be able to use artificial intelligence in a very healthy way for humanity. And I'm kind of excited to imagine what a whole world would be like if we were all light workers working with the same intention. You know, many of us think that we have great ideas if only everybody thought like us. Well, diversity is obviously the point, you know, to have different people with different abilities coming together is the trick, as opposed to everybody being the same. And I'm kind of excited by the thought that more people in corporate jobs or parenting, or just even setting up their own businesses, taking that plunge and being brave, because they can now sense more of their soul vision of what they're here to do. And sort of stepping away from the pain that's been driving them and just really connecting to what they want to see, what better world they want to see, how they want to see things done differently, and taking that first step to achieve that. I think that would be an amazing world. And, you know, I've just kind of was thinking recently about the DNA activation of the indigenous tribes. And I think back to that time and thought, well, what happened if at that point, instead of us going from the European angle or the indigenous tribes, what if the indigenous tribes became the dominant species? Let's call it a species at that time, and became the trend setters for how we behaved as humans. And what would they do with technology? Like, how would they have integrated technology into their everyday? How would that have worked? As opposed to going a little bit too much technological and logic focused, which was the opposite was. And it's the same again when you get to the 1800s and you start seeing this esoteric way of thinking, which is very soul-based, versus the personality and Freud and Jung and psychology kind of way. And again, you start seeing the split again. And I just keep thinking, like, what would it be like if those splits never happened and it was more soul-led, more nature-based, more natural? Where would we be now? Would we have developed the technology? I'm not sure. Would we have just integrated it differently? I'd like to think that there would have been a balance. But that's what we're being asked to think about now. We're being asked to really consider everything from scratch, of how we can pull together the solutions and see beyond our judgments and our preconceived ideas of things, but using that conviction of our beliefs and that obedience to our soul expression to become our authentic self. Because the more authentic we are, then the more authentic other people around us have got permission to be. Because we're not here to change others, we're just changing ourselves to become that most authentic, soul-led version of ourselves, and showing how that would look to others so that they can learn how to do that too. So that's this week's soul lesson. So let me know how that was. I know it's a bank holiday here. So we've got some comments here. See if I can get that to come up a little. Oh, I've lost them. Cool. Where did that go? Oh, there they are. Okay. They jumped. So Meditation Matter says, my initial reaction was to contract like you. Yeah. It was a really odd spiritual question to be obedient. I was like, ooh. But walking around the house, skewing light language. Yeah. Speaking. Yeah, I was going to say speaking. Yeah, I actually sneezed light language the other day, but it did make me giggle. I was like, to sneeze light language is really quite funny. Yeah, Amanda, you have to remind me that that's you. But yeah, like language for me is just the way I speak, is the way I use my words, I think. And because the only reason I know that is because like we did a meditation this week for the for my membership leading into this month's energy, and the word was conviction, and it just didn't, I couldn't quite get it into the sentence, and yet every time I tried to find a different word, it kept saying conviction. I was like, I could feel what it meant and I could sense what it meant, but I knew how it was going to sound to others. So I had to say afterwards, like, you know, this conviction is this kind of, it's quite a powerful feeling. If you can connect to the conviction of your beliefs, it's got so much power behind it, but I don't know how else to express it, but that's the word they want us to hear. So that's the way I like to work with words, I guess. But yeah, sneezing like language was quite funny. I did message some people, I go, I just sneeze like language. It kind of went, achoo, ka kiki ka. I went, whoa, okay. Not coming to sneak up on me that way. But yeah, there's lots of different ways we can express our soul. And, you know, Alicia and Ava do amazing light language, and I really feel what they do. So I love what they do. It's just I'm not quite sure my logical brain is quite ready for that yet. So yes. Any other comments coming through before I finish, because we're coming up to the end of time? Just checking in on all the bits. It's harder to do when you're on your own. So yeah, so this week's soul lesson then is all about obedience, getting a better sense of yourself in terms of who is in the driving seat of you. So you could become more soul-led and less personality, society, and working out why you gave up yourself to allow those things to drive you. Because the better you can understand that, then the better you'll find what limitations you're playing. And if you remember, I said that, you know, each time you take a decision and you choose the less bold path, then you're basically weaving yourself into a lower version of yourself, into a lower timeline, into a more limited version of yourself. And when you stop that and you become more obedient to your higher calling of your soul, then you're inviting in more of your soul, and you're also inviting in more of your power. So everything you do now this month is going to be what you attract. So think very carefully about how you use that energy and power this month. And please come back to this video and share with me what new energetics have come through this month. So I'm excited to see what we're all going to be experiencing. So I'll be live every Monday on YouTube to do this kind of conversation. I'll be sensing into the quantum realm and sensing what energies they want to share with you. But it's only for 30 minutes, after which then I move on to Zoom and I have a conversation, sort of more free format conversations where I can answer questions and we can delve into the topic a little bit more deeply. And I'm particularly interested in people learning to express themselves on the topic as well, because I think many of us have extra clues about all of this that really need to be expressed. And we don't have a safe container to do that, or at least we might not have been practiced or even tried. You know, you might be not a light worker and never tried to express any of this. I've seen some really interesting comments on my videos that I'd love for those people to come and speak with us and share and get used to that kind of process of sharing that. But I also have a membership. Well, it's more of a kind of knowledge base. Being a computing person, the logical part comes from my logic for computer analysis and programming. I also have a bit of an artificial intelligence background, which meant I was always into knowledge bases. And I'm trying to build this, this membership in a way that it becomes a knowledge base. And it's got some amazing features. I'm so excited. I'm a bit of a nerd now. But it's just introduced what they're calling AI wisdom. So it's like ChatGPT, but it's ChatGPT on my content. So I can ask myself questions about what something means or what I've said about something. Because for me, when I'm doing these kind of things, it's kind of channeled and I don't remember what I've said. So when I'm downloading all this information, afterwards I listen back and I'm like, oh, did I say that? That's interesting. So to have this new AI added onto my membership platform that I can now search my downloads and see what I said and then bring them back as a like a combination of all of what I said in different videos, I'm super excited with. So I'm hoping that's going to be a feature I can offer people in my membership soon. But for now, what I'm doing is just loading up videos with conversations like this to expand your consciousness, to increase your soul awareness, to help you connect to your soul vision so that you can become more aligned and more soul aligned with the life that you want. And there's always a live aspect to them as well. There's live workshops that I put on because again, it's that communication. I want people to talk to each other and start learning, not just to listen to me, but to learn to express themselves and to be able to follow their line of thought and their soul niggles, and learning how to word them and express them. And that's a hard process. I went through the same, and it doesn't come naturally. I couldn't even see visions when I first started meditating. So I've had to work on that. And that's what I'm helping people through what I learned and what worked for me to share that with others too. So if any of that sounds any interesting to you, then I've got courses and I've got one-to-ones you can join me with as well. Then just DM me, because I always offer a complimentary soul alignment assessment. And that will allow you to at least see where you're at and what you want, and whether I have something that can help with that. So thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next Monday. And yes, do keep in touch on what comes up, and I'll see you all next week.